So to start us off, can you just describe what the Safe Babies Court Team approach is?
Sure. So the Safe Babies Court Team approach is a relationship-based, trauma-informed way of handling cases in the child welfare system that includes babies and toddlers. So instead of, taking the legal and compliance way of doing things, the Safe Babies Court Team approach is more focused on, the baby's brain development, supporting, the families that are involved in the child welfare system, but also the biggest thing, which is that healthy attachment, secure attachment between a child, an infant and toddler, and their caregiver. So that's kind of about, the approach in general. And why we focus on that age group 0 to 3 is, when we talk about brain development, one of the things that we've learned through the science behind this approach is that 80% of a child's brain develops by the age 3. And so that's a lot of learning and bonding and attachment and neurons kind of going crazy in their brains. And they're learning a lot at that time. And so it's such a critical time in a child's life. And that we focus on this time and why it's so important. And what we kind of do is work with the families differently. It doesn't look, the same as a traditional case because this is such a critical time in a child's life. So we put more eyes on the family, more supports on the family, more wraparound services, but while also focusing on the child's brain development and development as a whole. And so we do that by having monthly family team meetings with the families and their supports. We do it by having monthly court hearings where the judge gets to keep eyes on, this baby and this family as a whole on a much more consistent basis. In this case, every 30 days. And that's the way that we kind of always touch base on what's important, whether it's development or the foundation of the parents and what their success looks like.
Okay. So just to clarify a couple terms that I think I'm aware of because of my work, and you clearly are aware of because of your work. When you say the term permanency, what does that mean?
So it's time until a child finds their forever home. So it can mean a few different things. There are a few different permanency options, but the goal behind it is just finding their forever home. So one permanency option can be reunification. And that takes place when the child is reunified with their parents. They're placed back in their parents' care. Another form of permanency is adoption. And that's when the child also finds their forever home. And it might not be with the biological parents, but they go through that process and that's now their forever home. And it's also another process we call KLG, which is kinship legal guardianship. And it's when a child is permanently placed with family member or kin or family friend. And the difference between a adoption and KLG is for adoption, the parents' rights are often terminated. However, for KLG, they are not. So we say forever home because that does dismiss litigation. Oftentimes, we work with families who have cases that are currently in court. And when we reach that time of permanency, we're done with the litigation piece and the court piece.
The permanency is a legal framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you're explaining. And it's also, as I understand it, to make sure when you say forever home, so that the child has a stable home that is their family.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So the families that are involved, obviously Safe Babies, you mentioned it's very young children, infants. But then who typically are the parents who are involved in these cases?
Most of our parents that we work with in Safe Babies have experienced issues of substance use disorder. That's been a big piece of the moms and dads that we work with. But there are also other things like homelessness, mental health has been a big one as well. But I would say that those are the top 3.
That's preventing them from taking care of their infant, right?
Yes.
Okay. So somebody is making a decision or making the determination that if I'm one of these parents, I'm really not able to take care of my baby. Who is making that decision?
So DCPMP, the Department of Children and Families, they launch an investigation. Most of the time they'll receive a referral about a child being at risk. There are some safety issues there, and they'll do an investigation. And after that investigation, they'll determine whether or not it's safe for the child to stay in the home. And that's kind of when we come in, when they determine, the home is not a safe place for the child, and so we'll remove, and they do it. They do their legal process with that, meaning they'll go to the courts and they'll ask for custody of the child, and that's kind of when the process begins. But yeah, the division does an investigation and they determine whether or not a child can stay. So for some of our parents who have substance use disorder, most of the time I would definitely say that it's not a one and done thing. DCPMP has been great at kind of going in, trying to help out as far as give resources and, referrals to treatment programs. And it's usually when, something has occurred, whether it's urine screens that have been positive, or, the child is just not safe because of, mom or dad's situation while they're under the influence. The division does give a lot of support before removal is done. So I would say a removal is like the last resort. That often is what happens.
When the Division of Child Protection and Permanency now has come in, right, and put the child into a home, I think you referred to that's a resource parent. So for those who aren't familiar with the resource parent, in other states we call it a foster parent, right?
Parents, yep.
So the child now is living not with their parents, but maybe with a relative or an unrelated resource parent.
Yes.
And then you said, well, then when you come in, so where does the Safe Babies approach start?
We receive a referral from the courts, as well as DCPMP. Our eligibility requires a child to be between the ages of 0 and 3, but also have been removed from their parents' care and be in the jurisdiction that we currently work in. Right now we're in 3 counties, Hudson County, Passaic County, and Essex County. So we'll get an alert, it's like a ding, hey, we have a removal coming up. This is when the removal hearing is going to take place if you can join. And so typically one of the community coordinators specifically designated to that county would show up to the court hearing. Now, if the judge upholds the removal and say, yes, I think it is best that the division gains custody of the child, we then get the opportunity to speak with the parents for about 1 to 2 minutes. We don't talk a lot about the program at that moment because, as you can imagine, it's a very tough moment to experience. Like, this is a time where, my child has been removed and it's confirmed by a judge, this is happening. And so I think the biggest part about that moment is that's our first contact, that's our first impression. And so our community coordinators in that moment always show empathy, but we're really there to get the parents' contact info so we can meet them at a later time when emotions aren't so high, stress levels aren't so high, and we can talk more about the program and what the benefits are. So that's when the court team approach kind of starts in the courtroom after a removal hearing. We'll set up a time to meet with the parents afterwards, and we'll talk about the program in detail, what the benefits are, what we help with, answer any questions that they may have. And at that moment, the parents can decide, whether or not they would like to participate, because the Safe Babies Court Team program is a voluntary program. So parents have to sign consent to participate. And once they sign consent is when the work begins. So that's kind of how we get involved right in the beginning.
So 2 questions I have. One, how do you find it difficult to have a parent trust the program or the approach? And I'm also thinking, in these cases, parents are assigned an attorney. So do you find it sometimes difficult to get the attorney to trust the approach?
I'll start with the attorneys first, because we do, at the time of the removal hearing, their attorneys are there, and typically we're put in like a breakout room with the parents and their attorney to talk about it. Now, the relationships that we've created with the parental attorneys within the counties that we work with have been strong. The parental attorneys have really been champions of the program, and they support the program because of the extra support, in addition to DCPMP, that we get the parents and helping them navigate, more one-on-one kind of support throughout this process. So it hasn't been difficult with the attorneys because they're a big supporter of the program. There are times when the prosecutor's office are involved, and the attorneys would rather not have their clients participate in the program because, if something is said that doesn't need to be said, prosecutor's office is involved, it can hurt their client. So and I wouldn't even say that that's a challenge. We understand it. Mm-hmm. And so that's for the attorney. So I would say for the most part, it's great. They support the program. We're okay in that area. And I would say for the parents, when it comes, to any challenges that we face when speaking to them or, getting them to believe in the program, sometimes I would say it's about 50-50 because the reality is we get 2 minutes and that's our first time meeting them. And we're just like, hey, this is what we do. If you can give me a number, I can give you more detail. And that's why the empathy piece is so important because, we don't know what the parents have went through and what they've gone through and what communications they've had with people and how they've been made to feel. We don't know, especially if police officers are involved. Sometimes, things just happen. And so in showing that empathy, we try to help gain that trust, even though we have a small window of time. If we can get the parents to meet with us at a later time or even talk to us after, we're pretty much good because now it's like, okay, so the parents are willing to listen and see what we have to offer, see what kind of support we have. It can be challenging sometimes because, parents are frustrated with this entire process from the removal of their child and they look at you as just like another person that's keeping eyes on them and tabs on them and telling them that they're a bad parent and removing the child. And so sometimes we get some pushback with that or we'll get parents who, will go missing and not meet up with us or not call us back. So I would say it's really just hit or miss sometimes. It can be challenging. For the most part, it's been okay. We've been able to get, consent and meet with the parents and gain their trust in such a short amount of time, especially when we say that we're a neutral party. Like we're not affiliated with, DCPNP. We're not affiliated with, any other programs. We're a neutral party specifically designed, to support you and your baby and your foundation. And so typically we get good feedback after that.
Well, I would think that is critical. And actually, maybe you're not so neutral if you're there really and you're able to say to them, we're here to support you, mom, you, dad, and your child, right? The healthy development. So talk a little bit about what the resources are that you try to connect the parents with. I mean, you mentioned substance abuse program, but what are the other things that parents might need?
Any type of mental health support, mental health treatment. We also would link parents to different food pantries in their area, places where they can go to get support if ever they hit a low in their lives, because it all happens. It happens to all of us. So substance use treatment, Mommy and Me programs, we have built relationships with those programs to kind of help secure beds where we can probably try to expedite the process. Food pantries. We also help fill out applications for insurance, whether that's through Medicaid or whatever they need, but also just anywhere in their area where they can use support. So women's meetings, not necessarily an inpatient substance use treatment program, but women's meetings and NA meetings to connect them within their community so that they have support from other outlets. So really any service that a parent needs, we'll connect them. And that doesn't stop at any DV services for the parents, any services that just help with like maternal health, all the things. I think the list goes on. Whatever the needs are, we'll find it. So I think I always say this, and this is a big thing to me. We might not be the experts in all the things, but we will for certain find out who the experts are. And that's the community part and being a community coordinator.
Are a lot of these parents alone, meaning they don't necessarily have family supports or friends in the community? And maybe when you're talking about finding them supports or finding them a woman's group or maybe a church group or something, it's because they don't have those supports?
Yeah, for the most part, a lot of our parents are alone. I've noticed a big percentage of our parents come from different counties. And they'll end up in Passaic County because of the Mommy and Me program, like, Eva's Village. And so they're from more south of Jersey and they're up here and they're alone. Usually a lot of single parents that we work with. Family is just not as, supportive as they would like. So I would say for the most part, yeah, parents are really alone. And even because there are parents who have support systems, there are parents who have family members who've agreed to take the kids in and who's also agreed to support the parents while they go through the journey. And those are our best cases. However, sometimes parents still feel alone, even in a room full of family, because everyone is an individual and not everyone goes through the same thing. So while you have family, behind you that are there and they have the kids, can they identify with the trauma that you've experienced? Can they identify with, your addiction at the time or any mental health issues that you have? So I think it's a hit or miss.
So some families, it might be a little bit accusatory because maybe they didn't have the same problems as the parent, or maybe they tried to help the parent in the past and they were unsuccessful, right? So they're sort of,
Yeah,
they're done.
that's definitely been a thing. We've seen that a lot where it's like, not this time. Because like I said, usually when the child is removed, that's like the last straw. Everyone has kind of been pouring into at that point. And so that definitely happens. We have, parents who have family members who are just like, that's it. We've had it. And so we try to help build from that. We also, in one of the services that we'll find family therapy, because sometimes that also helps the foundation be even stronger. A strong parent is only as strong as their village is. So if we can help with that, then that works.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out the full conversation by clicking the link in the top right corner or the link in the description. And be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you enjoyed the video and want to be updated when our new interviews are released.